I was 26 when this happened. I lived alone in a second-floor apartment in a mid-sized city in Ohio. The kind of neighborhood where people keep to themselves because they work early and they're tired. The building had 8 units, and I knew maybe 2 of my neighbors by face. It started with a car I didn't recognize. I noticed it on a Tuesday morning when I left for work. A gray sedan, nothing distinctive about it, parked directly beneath my apartment window in the spot that belonged to Unit 3. Unit 3 had been empty for about a month. The previous tenant had moved out quietly, and the landlord hadn't found anyone new yet. I remember thinking the new tenant must have moved in overnight, which happens sometimes. And I didn't think about it again for the rest of the morning. I had a long commute and a full day ahead of me, and a parked car in a parking lot wasn't something that deserved more than a passing thought. I was right to think that. I was wrong to stop thinking about it as quickly as I did. When I came home that evening, around 6:30, the car was still there, in the exact same position. I noticed this because I had a habit. I don't know when I developed it, probably sometime in the first year of living alone, of glancing out the kitchen window when I got home, not for any real reason, just to look at the lot. The way you check a room when you walk into it, even though you're not expecting anything. The car was at a slight angle, the way people park when they're in a hurry or just not paying attention. And that angle was exactly the same as it had been in the morning. I stood there for a second and tried to remember if I had maybe imagined seeing it that morning, the way you second-guess small memories. I hadn't. I told myself it was probably just someone visiting a friend in the building and they'd taken the empty spot because it was convenient. That made sense. That was the kind of thing that happened all the time in apartment lots. I made dinner and watched something on my laptop and went to bed, though I did check the window once more before I turned in, and the car was still there under the yellow glow of the parking lot light, sitting in the same slightly crooked angle it had been in all day. Wednesday morning, still there. I took a photo of it on my phone before I left for work, the car and the window above it and the angle of the morning light. I'm not sure why I did that exactly. I think part of my brain had registered something and wanted a record. The way you write down a dream before you lose it, even if you're not sure it means anything. I mentioned the car to my coworker at lunch. The kind of offhand mention you make about things that don't fully add up, but don't fully alarm you either. She said it was probably a mechanic situation, someone waiting on a part, or a car that had broken down, and the owner had left it there while they sorted it out. I said, yeah, probably. I actually felt better after that conversation. By the time I got home Wednesday evening, I had almost entirely forgotten about it. The car was there. The driver's seat was occupied. Someone was sitting in it. I could see the shape clearly from my window. A head and shoulders visible through the rear windshield. The silhouette you get when you're looking down at a car from above at an angle. It was around 7 in the evening, and the parking lot light wasn't on yet. That in-between hour where there's still enough daylight to see shapes, but not enough to see detail. I stood at my kitchen window and looked at that shape for what I think was a long time. Though I don't remember exactly how long. I kept constructing explanations. Someone on a phone call who wanted privacy. Someone waiting to pick up a friend. Someone just sitting somewhere quiet because they needed to be out of their own apartment for a while. All of those were real things that real people did, and I knew that, and I kept reminding myself of that. While I stood there watching the back of someone's head through a windshield 2 floors below me. Something about it felt wrong in a way I couldn't specifically name, and I was trying very hard not to let that feeling get ahead of what I could actually see, which was just a person sitting in a car. That was all. So I moved away from the window and made myself do something else. About 45 minutes later, I let myself look again. The shape was gone, the car was empty. I stood there for a moment feeling something I couldn't quite identify. Not relief exactly. More like the absence of a pressure I hadn't realized I'd been carrying since I walked in. I checked my door lock before I went to bed that night. Then I checked it again. I checked the window latches, too, which I had never once done in the 2 years I'd lived in that apartment. And as I was doing it, I was already telling myself I was being ridiculous, that I had watched a stranger sit in their car for less than an hour, and I was now conducting a security sweep of my apartment like something terrible had happened. Nothing had happened. I knew that. I still checked everything twice. Thursday morning, I left my usual time. The car was there, same spot, same angle. I didn't let myself look at it for long. When I got home Thursday evening, it was gone. The space was empty, and the oil stain on the asphalt from someone else's car A stain that had been partially hidden under the gray sedan's front tire all week was visible again. I felt something release in my chest when I saw that empty space. I actually said something out loud. To nobody, something like finally, which I was embarrassed about immediately. I told myself I had let my imagination get way out ahead of me over nothing, and I made a specific decision to put the whole thing down and move on. On Friday morning, there was a note under my apartment door. It was a plain piece of white paper, folded once, no envelope. The hallway in my building is carpeted, and I sleep with a fan on for the white noise. And I had not heard anything. The note had been slid close to the wall on the left side of the door, where you might miss it if you opened the door wide and stepped straight out, which is what I usually did. I only found it because I dropped my keys and crouched down to get them and saw the edge of it. I unfolded it. One sentence written in ordinary, even unremarkable handwriting. It said, "I saw you watching, that was all." No signature, no indication of what it meant or who had left it or what they intended me to understand by it. I stood in my doorway holding that paper for a long time. My first real thought was that it was a joke, that one of my neighbors had noticed me staring out the kitchen window repeatedly over the course of the week and was messing with me in the way that neighbors sometimes do. A mean little prank with no real malice behind it. I tried to hold on to that explanation. I turned the paper over again, even though I had already confirmed there was nothing on the back. The handwriting was neat and unhurried, the kind of handwriting that tells you the person who made it wasn't in a rush and wasn't afraid. I kept telling myself it was a joke or a mistake, that it had been meant for a different door. Though I knew the numbered plates on every unit in that building were clearly visible and there was no plausible way to confuse them, I stood there until I realized I was still holding my keys and I hadn't moved toward my car at all. I brought the note to the building manager that afternoon. She was a practical woman, not the type to either dismiss things or amplify them, and she read the note twice and asked me if I had any idea who might have left it. I told her about the car. All of it. The days it had been there, the person I had seen sitting in it Wednesday evening, the note this morning. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said she would pull the footage from the interior hallway camera, the one mounted near the stairwell that covered the stretch of hall where my unit was. She called me the next day. The camera had gone offline sometime Wednesday night, a loose connection in the wiring, something that had apparently been intermittent for a while without anyone catching it. It had come back online Thursday afternoon. The gap in the footage covered the window of time when the note had almost certainly been left. She said the connection had since been repaired and she was sorry. I told her it was fine, which it wasn't, but which was the only thing I could think to say. I still have the note. It's in a drawer in my kitchen, still folded the way it was when I found it. I've never found out who left it. I've never seen that gray sedan again, or at least I've never seen one that I could say with certainty was the same car. I've thought about it a lot over the past couple of years, specifically about the phrasing. Not what it said, "I saw you watching," but what it implied, which is that they had been watching first. That whatever I noticed on Tuesday morning was not the beginning. That by the time I was standing at my kitchen window looking down at a car I didn't recognize, someone had already been looking up. I don't know for how long. I don't know what they saw before I started looking back. I've stopped trying to figure out what would be worse. That it was something random and meaningless, or that it wasn't. My name is Marcus, and this happened about a year ago, late November. Driving back from my brother's place in central Tennessee. I take the same route every time, a long stretch of interstate, and then a 2-lane state road for the last 40 minutes. It was a Sunday night and there was almost no traffic, and the dark out there is the kind of dark that people who grew up in cities don't fully understand until they drive through it alone. I noticed the truck about 20 miles past the last gas station. White pickup, nothing unusual about it. It was sitting about 3 car lengths behind me at what felt like a consistent distance. But I barely registered it, at first, because there was nothing to register. Someone behind me on an empty road was just someone behind me on an empty road. And I was listening to something on my phone and thinking about the week ahead, and not paying close attention to my mirrors. The moment I actually noticed it, the moment it moved from background to foreground in my awareness, was when I had to tap my brakes going around a long curve. There was something in the road. I don't remember exactly what. An animal maybe, or a piece of debris. And I slowed down for it. And the truck slowed down too. And when I came back up to speed, it settled back into exactly the same distance. 3 car lengths, not 2, not 4. The same gap maintained like a setting. I told myself it was probably just a careful driver who had found a comfortable following distance and was keeping it, which is a thing that people do, which is a completely normal thing. I turned up whatever I was listening to and kept driving. I changed my speed to test it. Not dramatically. I didn't want to do anything that would make the situation more active than it maybe was. I let my speed drop from 70 to 60 over about half a mile, gradual enough that it could read as just easing up on the cruise. The truck dropped to 60. I pushed back up to 74. The truck came back up. I held it there for a few minutes and then pushed to 78, which was more than I usually drive on that road at night. And the truck matched it without any visible hesitation, and then settled back to 3 lengths. I sat with that for a moment. I was trying very hard to think of the innocent explanation, because there is almost always an innocent explanation for things that feel wrong on empty roads at night. Your brain is running on adrenaline and pattern recognition, and it finds threats in coincidences. That is a documented human thing that happens. And I knew that, and I was using that knowledge to argue myself out of what my body was already telling me. I kept telling myself that people drove the same stretches at the same speeds all the time, and it meant nothing. I had 34 miles left to my exit. I watched the mirror for all of them. For 34 miles, that truck stayed exactly where it was. I want you to understand what that drive felt like, because I don't think it translates cleanly into description. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic. It was 34 miles of absolute stillness in the cab of my car, my hands very quiet on the wheel, the music off, because I had turned it off without deciding to, watching 2 headlights in my rearview mirror hold a fixed position with a consistency that no one who was just going the same direction would bother to maintain. I passed 2 exits during those 34 miles. Each time I watched the mirror as I went by, watching for any flicker of the turn signal, any drift toward the exit lane. Both times the truck stayed straight. Both times I felt something tighten in my chest. I called my brother from the road and told him what was happening. He picked up on the second ring, and I told him about the truck and the speed test and the 30-some miles of the same gap. And he stayed on the line with me without making me feel like I was overreacting, which was what I needed. He knew the roads I was on. He told me about the police substation on Calhoun Road, about 4 miles from my exit, and said to drive straight there. I said, okay. My exit came up. Exit 44, which I have taken probably 100 times coming back from my brother's place. The ramp curves down from the interstate and deposits you onto a county road with nothing on it for the first 6 miles. No houses, no businesses, just land and tree line on both sides, and one road going forward. I take it every time. I knew exactly what it looked like in the dark. I signaled and took the ramp and watched my mirror. The truck took the exit. I know people say their stomach dropped when something happened, and it sounds like a cliche, but I am telling you, there is a physical thing that happens in your body when a fear you have been carefully managing for 34 miles suddenly becomes confirmed, when the thing you were 90% sure of becomes 100%. And I felt it. My hand stayed on the wheel, my speed stayed even. I did not slow down and I did not speed up, and I stayed in my lane. And I kept going because stopping was not something I was going to do, and there was nowhere to turn off, and what I had was forward. My brother was still on the phone. I told him the truck had taken the exit. He told me to keep talking to him and keep driving toward Calhoun Road. I said, okay. The county road is straight for the first couple of miles, and then it bends. When I came out of the bend, I could still see the headlights in my mirror, still the same distance. I had been telling myself the whole drive that there was an innocent version of this. A neighbor, a coincidence. Someone who just happened to be going the same way all the way from the interstate to this specific county road on this specific night. I was still holding on to pieces of that version, but they were getting harder to hold. The substation was about 3 miles ahead. I kept my speed steady. I did not let myself look in the mirror more than once every 30 seconds or so, because I had decided that if I watched it constantly, I would do something I couldn't take back. Brake too hard, or swerve, or something that would make whatever this was more immediate than it needed to be right then. About a mile before the substation, the truck turned. There's a dirt road on the left side of the county road, about a mile out from Calhoun. I have driven past it probably 100 times and never given it a thought. No mailbox, no sign, no visible structure from the road. Just a gap in the tree line and a dirt track going back into the dark. The truck's headlights swung left and disappeared into it, and the road behind me was empty. I sat with that for a second. My brother asked what had happened and I told him. I drove the rest of the way to the substation and pulled into the lot and sat there in the car for a moment before I went inside. The officer on duty was calm and thorough. He took everything I told him. The interstate, the speed test, the exit, the dirt road, and wrote it down and said he would run a patrol on the county road that night. He explained clearly that there was nothing he could do about a vehicle that had turned off a road without doing anything he could specifically charge, which I understood and didn't hold against him. He asked if I knew anyone who might have reason to follow me, and I said no. He asked if I had noticed the truck before tonight, and I said no. He gave me his card and told me to call the direct number if anything else happened. I sat in that parking lot for about 20 minutes after he went back inside, just sitting there with the engine running and the lot light overhead, before I made myself drive the rest of the way home. I have taken that route a dozen times since then. I take it because it is the fastest way, and because I decided I was not going to reorganize my life around something I couldn't prove. I watch my mirrors differently now. Not obsessively, but with a different quality of attention. The way you look at a spot on your skin after a doctor has pointed at it. I have never seen that white truck again on that road, or at least I have never seen one that I could say for certain was the same one, which is a different thing. I think about that dirt road. I've driven past it slowly a couple of times in daylight. There's nothing visible from the road. It bends almost immediately, and the trees close in, and you can't see where it goes or how far back it runs. I've looked it up, and I still don't know exactly what's back there or who owns the land. What I come back to, what I keep turning over, is that whoever was driving that truck knew that road was there. Didn't slow down to find it, didn't hesitate, didn't overshoot the turn, just swung left and disappeared like someone going home. That's not a person who got spooked and turned off to avoid a confrontation. That's a person who knew exactly where they were going before they ever got behind me on that interstate. And if they knew where they were going, then what 34 miles of the same gap at the same distance means is something I have never fully let myself finish thinking about. My name is Deanna, and I worked the Sunday morning shift at a small insurance office for about 2 years, from sometime in 2019 until early 2021, 7 to noon alone. The office was a converted house on a commercial strip, the kind of block that looks completely normal during the week and becomes very quiet on weekends, when everything around it closes down and the parking lots empty out and there's nothing moving on the street outside except the occasional car passing through. I had done that shift probably 80 or 90 times before any of this happened. I was used to it. The quiet had never felt like anything other than quiet. He called the first time at 7:43. I know the exact time because I logged it afterward and the phone system confirmed it. He asked for someone named Mitchell. Not a first name, just Mitchell, the way you'd ask for someone you knew by last name only, or the way you'd read a name off a piece of paper. I told him there was no one here by that name and that he might have the wrong number. He said sorry and hung up. That was the entire call, maybe 15 seconds. I told myself it was exactly what it sounded like, a wrong number on a Sunday morning, and I went back to what I was doing. I had a backlog of filing to get through, and the call was already out of my head before I'd even set the phone down. He called again at 8:15. Same voice, he asked for Mitchell again. When I told him again that there was no one here by that name, he didn't say sorry right away. There was a pause first. Not a long one, maybe 3 seconds, maybe 4. But it was the kind of pause that doesn't come from someone who has just realized they've dialed the wrong number a second time. Someone who had genuinely misdialed twice would either laugh a little or sound frustrated or just immediately apologize. This pause had none of that. It was quiet and considered, like he was deciding something. And then he said thank you and hung up. I sat there for a moment after the call ended. Something about it felt wrong, though I spent the next several minutes talking myself out of that feeling, because what had actually happened was that someone had called twice asking for a wrong name, which was irritating but not alarming, and the pause I was reading so much into could have meant anything or nothing at all. And I was alone in a quiet building on a Sunday morning, and my brain was probably just looking for something to do. I told myself that specifically. I went back to the filing. I probably checked the front window once, just a glance, and then I made myself stop. At 8:48, he called a third time. He didn't ask for Mitchell. He said, in a completely level and ordinary voice, that he was outside and wanted to know if I could let him in. I asked who he was. He said he had gotten the number from information, which is a thing that used to be possible for listed business numbers. So, that part wasn't impossible, but it didn't answer my question. I asked again who he was and what he needed. He said he was just looking to come in for a minute. Not that he needed help with a policy, or had an appointment, or was a client, or any of the things a person calling a business on a Sunday morning might reasonably say. Just that he wanted to come in for a minute, said in the same level tone, unhurried. Like he was asking something completely reasonable. I don't remember exactly what I said next. I think I told him we weren't open on Sundays, and that he should call back during business hours. He said he knew we weren't open. He said it without any edge to it, the way you'd acknowledge a minor inconvenience. And then he said it again, that he just wanted to come in for a minute. And then the line was quiet, and I realized he was waiting for me to respond. I want to be honest about what was happening in my head in that moment, because I think it matters. Part of my brain was still working very hard to construct an innocent version of who this person was. A confused client who had driven a long way and didn't understand how business hours worked. Someone having a hard morning who had fixated on the wrong address. Someone elderly maybe who wasn't fully tracking the situation. I kept that version alive in my head for as long as I could because the alternative, that this was a man who had called 3 times in just over an hour, who had confirmed I was alone in a building, who was now telling me he was standing outside, was something I wasn't ready to fully accept yet. I kept the innocent version going for probably 30 seconds after the call ended. Then I walked to the front window and looked out. There was a man standing on the sidewalk in front of the building looking directly at the entrance. He was maybe 60, maybe a little older. Medium height jacket, hands in his pockets. He looked completely unremarkable, the way someone looks when they have specifically decided to look unremarkable. He wasn't pacing or looking around or doing anything that would draw attention from a passing car. He was just standing there with the stillness of someone who was comfortable waiting, like he had done this before, and knew how to do it without making it visible. I stepped back from the window. I don't think I did it consciously. My body just moved back before my mind caught up with the reason. I called my manager. She didn't pick up. I left a voicemail that I don't remember exactly, but which I know from the message I left was calm in a way that my body was not. I then called the building's emergency maintenance line, because it was the only other number I had available to me in that moment. And the man who answered listened to what I told him and said he wasn't sure what I wanted him to do, which I understood. I kept the front window in my sight line while I was on the phone with him. The man outside was still there. I called 911. I told them about the 3 calls, the voice, the progression from wrong number to asking to come inside, the man on the sidewalk. The dispatcher asked me if he had made any explicit threats, and I said no, not in direct words. She said she was sending a unit and told me to stay on the line and under no circumstances open the door. I said I understood. I moved to the back corner of the main room, the spot where I could see the front window but where I was far enough from it that I couldn't be seen clearly from street level. I stood there with the phone against my ear, and I watched the front of the building. He stood there for about 4 more minutes. I watched the whole thing. He didn't move toward the door. He didn't look at his phone. He didn't look up and down the street the way people do when they're waiting for someone. He just stood there in the same position, hands in his pockets, weight evenly distributed, facing the building. Then he turned and walked to the side parking lot and got into a car. I couldn't fully see from my angle and left. I heard the engine. I did not hear it pull back around to the front. I stayed in that back corner until the 2 officers arrived about 7 minutes later, and even then I asked them to identify themselves before I unlocked the door. I gave them everything: the call times, the voice, the content of each call, a description of the man, the direction he'd walked when he left. They pulled the call logs from the office phone system before they left. They told me they would follow up. One of them, before he walked out, looked at me and said I had handled it correctly, which I appreciated more than I probably showed. My manager called me back about 20 minutes after the officers left. I told her everything. She told me I had done everything right and asked if I wanted to go home, and I said yes, and I left. For a week or so after that, I went back and forth on it. Part of me kept suggesting that I had maybe misread the whole thing, that the man outside had just been someone waiting for a bus or standing outside for a phone call of his own, and that the calls had been a genuine wrong number situation, and I had connected 2 unrelated things into something that felt coordinated but wasn't. That version was easier to live with, and I tried it on for a while. I think I almost had myself convinced by about the 10-day mark. Then my manager called me on a Thursday. She had been doing some reorganization in the back of the office, and she had found something in the supply closet. It was a closet in the rear of the building, the kind of deep, narrow closet that holds printer paper and cleaning supplies and things nobody needs very often, with a door on the back wall that led to a small concrete step in the rear parking lot. The kind of door that exists in old converted houses and that nobody really thinks about, she said. The rear latch on that door had been worked from the outside. She couldn't tell when it had been done. The door hadn't been forced, no damage to the frame, no broken hardware. The latch had been manipulated from the outside until it released. The way you can do with certain older residential latches, if you take your time and know how they work. The door had been pushed back into place and reclosed so that nothing looked disturbed. She had no way of knowing how long it had been like that. She had a locksmith come that same afternoon to replace the hardware. I don't know when someone got into that closet. I don't know if it was once or more than once. I don't know what they were doing in there, or what they were looking for, or what they found. I don't know if the man on the sidewalk that Sunday was the same person who had worked that latch, or if the calls and the man in the door were all part of the same thing, or separate things that happened to land in the same period of time. What I know is the sequence. The calls came first, each one a small step closer, and the man came third, and he stood outside for 4 minutes, and then left without trying the front door. And somewhere in that building, in a closet nobody checked regularly, a back door had already been opened. He didn't need to ask to come in through the front. I think he was seeing whether I would let him in myself. I think the 3 calls were about finding out how alone I was, and how I responded to pressure, and how long it would take me to do something about it. I think the 4 minutes on the sidewalk was the answer to a question he had already mostly answered on the phone. I think by the time he walked away, he knew what he needed to know. That's what I can't put down. Not what he did, what he was figuring out.